So my name is Peter Volgger. I'm currently working at the Institute for Architectural Theory in Innsbruck, and my presentation today provides an insight into an ongoing research on migration and city. And today I would like to focus on the issue of houses and homes in the context of migration. So the world today is confronted with precarious lives, with mobility. The 21st century will be a century of mass migration, and the nation state is going to obsolete. The cultural differences are going to disappear, but we can see also the opposite. According to Deleuze and Guattari, deterritorializing processes have always to be understood together with processes of re-territorialization of new spatial formations. So what we are seeing today is we see communities coming back into existence that reinvent or rebirth new identities, new relationship between identity, territory, mobility, and materiality. So there was literature about that, about this new formation of territories, or how this focus could enable us to rethink new territories, even in terms of architectural theory, and how to think about this new spaces, about these new forms of rooms that we call trans phenomena. Trans phenomena because they go beyond the traditional house or beyond the state, beyond migration itself. So we speak about transmigration. So we deal with the issue on the basis of African migrants in Bolzan. It is the capital of South Tyrol, in northern part of Italy. And they came all the way from Senegal. They belong to a religious brotherhood. And this organization was founded in the late 19th century in Senegal by Ahmadou Bamba under the protection of French colonizers. And this organization emerged in the surroundings of the holy city of Tuba. Their strong belief connects these people worldwide, so they are living in Tokyo as well and in New York, but even in Europe. So the Moritz, however, are nearly full-time travelers, constantly moving in search for new goods and new clients. These traders have neither the time nor the money nor the resources to transform their households or their rooms in any radical way. So the interventions of them are very, very minimal. They establish dynamic networks within circulating territories, commuting between their home country, Senegal, and the host country, which is Italy. But they do neither belong to Senegal nor to Italy, because they live in an in-between and betwixt situations. They are so-called trans-migrants. So, at the beginning in the 80s, when they emerged in Italy, they changed their whereabouts seasonally. So in the winter they go back to Senegal. During the summer they are working as travelers, as vendors along the beaches in Italy. And in the transition time they work in the Italian factories. So what you see here is a so-called matang. A matang is a navigation tool used by fishermen on the high seas to manage the flows. So in a metaphorical sense, this matang is used by the Moritz to manage the flows of globalization. So what I want to say is that these matangs are used as flying scaffolds. So Moritz don't refer to the built environment, but they refer to structures that the forerunners of their own group left behind. They have their own settings, their own collectings of spaces. The Moritz traders established their own settings on Italian territory. They weave their own web of social, political, and religious life. So as a result, autonomous structures emerged on the Italian territory, and the Moritz established collective settings of reference, so-called translocalities. And these translocalities are established as settings for the social interaction, and also for the religious interactions, because the nodes of these networks are the so-called dairas. And this is a Wolof expression, a Wolof language, and the English translation maybe is, or probably is, the circles for the prayer. And this connection of all all these eras or places is called Seasonality, the chain of blessing. So to describe this new territories, we deal with the model of an archipelago used for the first time by Diego Barajas. Diego Barajas worked at the Volgger Institute in Amsterdam, and he investigated how Cape Verdean migrants reproduced their natural archipelago in the left side in the form of a new artificial urbanism in the city of Rotterdam. So in the same way they collect the islands at home by using their boats, they do it in Rotterdam. They collect the islands consisting of restaurants, of club rooms, and so on. And they do it on the basis of mass transport of mass medias, by using the mobile phone, for example. So the problem now is how to describe these new spaces of migration. Which are the tools to describe this, which are the analytical tools. So the crucial question is how can they construct these archipelagos and how can they uphold the identity of long distances. So the problem is that we can't recur to traditional categories like size or distance or scale, because migration spaces don't have a scale. They are scaleless. There are some scale jumpings, and there are some very paradoxical juxtapositions and superpositions of spaces. So referring to John Law and Emery Moore, we can describe with these multiple topologies some of those hybrid and dynamic spaces. And according to Bruno Latour's cycles of mobility and mutability, we can give those building blocks of the Senegalese migrants the name of mutable mobiles and immutable mobiles. So it is very important to know that Senegalese migrants always live in groups of 3 or 4 persons in one household. They live together, they share everything, they stick together, and they have a very strong sense of solidarity. So the mutable mobiles are the households or the single dwellings. They have moving households organized in groups, and there is always one marabut, one religious leader responsible for the groups, but one marabut supports many of those groups all over the world. So this mobile home now doesn't coincide with the materiality of a house, that's clear. Then the immutable mobiles are the dahira, these religious centers or the circles for the prayer. So they work like totems. They force the actors to follow a certain program, which is a religious program in this sense. And if there is a dahira, all the households dance together around this dahira, and then some urban archipelago appears. This is the dahira in Bolson. So, using this topological approach, I would just like to explain now what is topology. Topology is a study on continuity. It is a study on properties that some object retains under deformation, under the impact of migration. So topology has to do with squeezing, bending, stretching, but not with breaking. So we are always interested in the search for topological invariants. What are the invariants of the constants within the space of migration? That's the crucial question. Now, we can build on this topological basis all the phases of the Senegalese migration. So what you see here are 3 phases, 3 main phases of the migration of Senegal migrants. The first is the rural migration from the land into the cities. The second is the urban migration within the Senegalese cities. And the third phase is the transmigration, the transnational migration. And each of these phases is connected to one type of migrant. So the first phase is, for example, to the Baol Baol, the second to the Bana Bana, and the third to the Modu Modu, it's an African language. So this means that the global player of the Morid migrants is always connected with the transnational space. So we cannot only distinguish between phases of migration, but also between types of archipelagos. For example, the first type is the religious archipelago with the center of Tuba. Tuba is the holy city for them. This in the western part of Senegal. The second type of archipelagos is the economic, with the economic center in the Sandaga market in Dakar. Then the third type of archipelago is the archipelago of a transnational village. There are villages in Africa that disappear, and when the migrants come home during the winter months, this village re-emerges. And this here is the archipelago of a family. It's the family soul. And when one member of this family is currently living in Bozen, and what you see is that all these households are scattered all over Europe and Africa. But they stick together. There is a connection. And this connection we call archipelago. Yeah. And the Murid have an own name for this, their own name, which is Silsila al-Dam, which means chain of blood. So coming to Bozen, we first had to find out how many Senegalese migrants do there live. So it was very difficult to find this out. And so we had to ask first of all about the official authorities. They gave us some data. Then we reconstructed the settlement. And there is one characteristic element of all Italian cities, this diffuse settlement pattern. So there is no ghetto, for example. There is no striking concentration of migrants. For many reasons. One reason, for example, is that migration is less visible if there is no ghetto. So it is a political decision in this sense. So the main thesis of our work is that the African migrants construct and inhabit a real African fragment within the city of Bozen. So there is an African village, and they become local villagers in the global cities of the world. It is the same case in New York. They are global villagers within, they are local villagers within the global cities, to quote Saskia Sassen. So this African village then appears as an archipelago. It is a bundle of ties of local and global actors. And this archipelago is fixed temporarily, just to disappear shortly afterwards. So the archipelagos has always to be contextualized, step by step, following the actors. And there are some tendencies, and we describe those tendencies by using topological tools. So I can give you just two examples. If there are households and there is a central dahira, symbolized by this star, by the red star, then these households tend to gather around the star, around the dahira, and the urban archipelago gets the property of convergence. It is not the same as a historical center, but it's somehow a center for them. And there is a second property. If it is thinkable, so at least thinkable, to cover all the world with the same patterns of households, then this is a proof for the impact of globalization on a concrete place in the world. So Bozen becomes a part of a transnational nexus if it is thinkable to cover all the world with these households. These are so-called mobility maps, and we use them to analyze or to record the mobility of some persons. So we asked two Murids to draw Bozen from their point of view. And these are the two results, and you see that they differ. They differ because at the left side there is a very strong emphasis on the elements of their own network. These are the network elements of the Murid network, because, for example, there is lavoro, which means work, or casa, which is the house, and the dahira. So this person lives in a kind of cultural bubble, in a self-sufficient layer of migration. There are several elements of the network. On the right side, this person, his name is Mamadou. He lives in Bozen since a couple of years. And this map is more extended. This map contains more details from the real surrounding of Bozen. But it is not a question of integration, it is just a question of an autonomous culture of migration. So in the late 80s and the beginning of the 90s, the Murid people moved from the south of Italy to the north, changing their whereabouts, because the Italian government gave them the resident permit. So they moved to the north and settled down along the industrial axis from Milan to Venice. and they settled down and moved into overcrowded houses, apartment houses for hotels. So having lost their initial function, these houses turned into what we call vertical cities, because they have a very strong density and an overlapping of urban programs. So we are interested in these structures because this, for example, is the hotel house in Bosphorus, in the south of Ancona. And here, more than 3,000 migrants live from over 40 countries of the world. So what is a house? A house within a circulating territory is a node. And we describe those territories by using Hegerstrand diagrams or time-space cubes. So they are very useful to describe how people use a territory and how those territories turn into panels of ties. Panels of ties are houses. So within each house there are cycles, are timer cycles of social life, economic life, and cultural life. By using this tool, the Hegerstrand diagram, it's possible to analyze these territories. Our work, we are not only concerned with the materiality of migration, but also with the material effects of having moved to another place. So we use this archipelago model not only to describe urban situations or trans-urban situations, but also to analyze a single dwelling. So a dwelling for Bruno Latour is an interrelativity between human beings and things. And some of those things are very important for us. We call them ethnic markers. They are responsible for the localization of the identity of people. So if you see, for example, at the background of the image above the door, there is the image of the founder of this religion group, of Ahmadu Bamba, and this becomes an icon for them. It is the only image of the founder of this religion group. So this is an ethnic marker. And this ethnic marker is the only point where the migration networks materialize. This is the point where we can speak about Mooric space making. The next thesis is that transnational communities are not anymore rooted in a space with stable patterns of interaction. Some of those patterns might be stable, but most of them are not. So we propose a tool to generate such patterns, such a kind of pattern language. It's like Christopher Alexander's pattern language, but with an ethnical approach. So in the upper half, we refer on Apadurai, who defines the production of locality as a social agency, as a work of imagination. And we decided, to be more concrete, to add one more of these capes. We call this material culture. So we are interested in material culture. In the middle part, we deal with Wittgenstein's familiar resemblances. In German it is Familienähnlichkeiten, just to produce such patterns. And then we use these patterns through calculated methods of sections to describe situations within the house. So this is the last image. What I want to do at the end of my presentation is show how the analysis of such one floor of the hotel house could emerge. So this is now the analysis with this pattern language. And what we see is that all those 40 groups of migrants have their own program. And there are some differences in how migrants perceive home. It is interesting to see how they differently construct their home within the same building. So some migrant groups, for example, might live a nomadic life. They use apartments, different apartments at different times. But there are also other groups which use, for example, more rooms to produce a collective household. This is what we currently do. So thank you very much for your attention.
Roma 3. I'm a young researcher and deputy coordinator of Masson housing, as you can see from the slide. This is second level master, is about housing, as you see. And my presentation is about two research I made in last year and what I produced after this research. And probably my presentation, my paper is not probably for this conference, because it's not about theory or architecture, but it's about practice most of all. But I'm really happy to be here, and I would like to thank the organization to accept my paper as well. And what I would like to tell about is that my presentation can be read in different ways, and because it has multi layers, different layers, and probably it is the story of a best practice, but also the story of a wedding between theory and practice in architecture, and also the story of an lucky encounter between university and housing association. Most of European cities have an important part of them of housing stock built after the Second World War, and because several cities expanded themselves from 10 to 20 times in the last 6 years. Nowadays, all the districts built in those years suffer from deterioration, due probably to their age, but as well as from some deficiency in the design plan. And for all the cases of great public intervention, I know in Europe, built under the pressure of how to give house to people, built with heavy prefabricated techniques. Today, architects need to plan a strategy of physical renovation, but also an improvement of public space, as well as an increase in district facility. Most of all, it is the design outline that caused all external areas and ground floor to be left to decay. My topic is the void and unused ground floor spaces. That it is the cause probably of this problem in such districts. Today in Italy we have also a regional law that allow to rebuild, to infill these voids with new dwelling, and it also grants strong improvement of current urban condition, avoiding the occupation of non-urbanized area. First research I follow in 2004 with my department of Dipartimento di Progettazione e Studio dell'Architettura, Department of Design and Study of Architecture of Roma 3, has focused its researches on rehabilitation of the housing stock built in Rome in a period, and I told you after. I'll tell you after. In this research on residential complex has identified the main issue of the aging building stock and possible strategies to be applied, not only to solve the obsolescence, the technological obsolescence, but also to counter the deterioration of the city, marginality, monofunctionality, low maintenance, etc. And these interventions are at the base of the building, at the ground floor, as I told you before, and in the voids of this building. The wrapping, so to just oppose a layer outside the building, and to work on the roof, on the top floor, and the last thing is to the redistribution of existing dwelling. And all the district shows all the characteristic sign of decay, abandonment, and isolation common to many other districts built in those years. Another research I followed in 2008 has investigated the potential for transformation of these free spaces at the ground floor, because it is a recurring theme of architecture of public districts, not only in Italy but in Europe. And the ground floor, generally designed with porch floor, conceived as places of community, are rapidly transformed in areas without a precise destination and without quality, as you can see from the images. There are spaces of transit, neglected, or at worst residual spaces avoided by the people because they are perceived as dangerous, for example. And the research has investigated the possible transformation of these spaces by the infill development with selected function. I have a problem because I would like to know how many spaces I have in Rome. I've chosen Rome because it's a case study very interesting because it's the biggest in Italy of this period, the expansion in this period, and the housing stock is most important in Italy. And I perceived a lack of collaboration with the housing association named Other, and probably I felt the real inability to know the number and the square meters of this area. So, assuming that the architecture for me, and not only for me, but for architecture, is an expression full of technical regulation, I propose a cross-reading of public housing with the regulation, laws and regulation that have generated to determine the amount of spaces available to be transformed. And if ground floor, porch floor, takes its origin from the 5 points of architecture of Le Corbusier, it is important to find out its first appearance in Italy, in social housing especially. So I analyzed the laws and regulation in Italy, but especially in Rome. This is the case study of my research. And so I will try to make a short story of the evolution of social housing in Italy with the help of some images of Rome. And the first step of the social housing in Italy at the beginning of the 20th century is the urban blocks. After a law named Legge. The reference model is the city block, and social housing sets again private construction that it is in this period differs from these in terms of habitable greater distance between the building in a same block, the greater amplitude of the courtyard in order to respond to new requirements for ventilation and or lighting, such as in this district named Staccio in Rome. And in this period there are no dwellings set at ground floor, most of all shops and storage. In the second period it appears the garden city with probably the same language, but the urban fabric, the urban grid pattern gives way to this named garden city, such as this one is always in Rome, is Acapella. The basement rooted to the ground for structural reason as well. Is characterized by small windows and rusticated in some cases with the presence of shops and stores, like in the previous example, and dwellings start from the first floor. In Europe, in this period, the principle of modern movement became to a certain extent. In Italy, this movement is called rationalismo, and social housing in Rome is not affected by this influence. After the Second World War, so we are in 1949, with the aim to solve simultaneously the problem of unemployment. You know, after the Second World War, Italy was destroyed, and there are many unemployers, and there are no houses for the people. With the In a Casa program, law by it's also named Ledent, So it aims to solve simultaneously the problem of unemployment in the house. This Una Casa program built a lot of districts, but it can be divided into periods, 7 years each. And the famous architect Alberto Libera, probably you know him because he's the designer of Villa Malaparte in Capri, will be the curator of the first 2 issues of the 4 manual of the Una Casa program. It is really interesting. And in this manual, the first 2, because in the first period they published only 2 manuals, and after in the second 7 year they published the other 2. There are many suggestions for the designers, and they allow dwellings and ground floor. But in Rome, probably we have the first realization on pilotis, as you can see from the image on the left. And it is named Tuscolano and is designed by this famous architect Alberto Libera. And as you can see from the other images above, that there are two other semi-public districts. One is Olympic Village, and the other one